Imagine working 2 jobs, coming home exhausted every night, and still not being able to pay the bills. Imagine growing up in a home where the lights sometimes went out because the electricity was cut off. That was Sarah's life, a young woman in Brooklyn, drowning in debt, with no clear future. But what if I told you that, without winning the lottery, without starting $1 million business, and without any special connections, she managed to completely change her financial destiny? This is the story of Sarah Alvarez, a waitress who went from broke and hopeless to financially free before the age of 30. Her journey proves that you don't need luck, you don't need privilege, you just need discipline, patience, and the courage to start. Sarah Alvarez grew up in a tiny apartment in Brooklyn, the daughter of hardworking immigrant parents from the Dominican Republic. Her father drifted in and out of her life, often disappearing for weeks to take low-paying construction jobs, while her mother, Carmen, worked endless hours cleaning offices. Money was always scarce, and Sarah learned very young that financial stress was part of daily life. She remembered coming home from school to find her mother sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by unpaid bills, sighing deeply as she tried to stretch what little money they had. By the time Sarah was 16, her father had left for good. She took on part-time work at a diner after school, scrubbing tables and pouring coffee. At first she hated it, but she quickly realized her paycheck helped cover rent and groceries. When she graduated high school, her classmates talked about college and careers. Sarah wanted that too, but tuition was out of reach. Instead, she stepped fully into the working world, juggling shifts at a diner during the day and at a pizza place on weekends. The money never seemed to last. She contributed to rent, bought groceries, and used credit cards to fill the gaps. What started as a few purchases here and there, a pair of shoes, some clothes, a new phone, turned into mounting debt. By 21, Sarah owed over $12,000 between credit cards and a small loan she had taken out to cover her mother's emergency hospital visit. Every month, she fell further behind. Her breaking point came one winter night. She got home from a late shift to find their apartment completely dark. The power had been shut off. Her mother was wrapped in a blanket at the table, trying not to cry. Sarah sat down, numb. She worked harder than anyone she knew, yet she couldn't even keep the lights on. That night, she lay awake shivering in bed, telling herself something had to change. If she kept living this way, she would never escape the cycle of debt and exhaustion. A week later, while working at the diner, she served a man who had become a regular. He always ordered the same thing, oatmeal and black coffee, and tipped generously. Unlike most customers, he asked about her life. One morning, after she vented about her bills, he studied her for a moment and then said quietly, "You're working harder than most, but you'll never get ahead unless you learn about money. Start with this." He scribbled the name of a book on a napkin, The Total Money Makeover. Sarah forced a smile and shoved the napkin into her apron. But later that night she searched for it online. She found a used copy for $4. Reading that book at night after work changed something inside her. It explained things she had never been taught: how credit card debt traps people, how to budget, why saving matters. At first, she resisted. How could she save when she barely made rent? But one exercise stuck with her, writing down every expense. She forced herself to track every dollar, and the results shocked her. She was spending nearly $200 a month on takeout and coffee, $60 on subscriptions she barely used, and even more on impulse shopping. It wasn't just that she earned too little, it was that she didn't have a plan. Ashamed but motivated, she drew up her first real budget. She canceled subscriptions, stopped eating out, and started bringing homemade lunches in cheap containers. Her friends laughed, but she didn't care. At the end of the first month, she had $300 left over, more than she had ever managed to save before. That small victory lit a fire in her. It took 4 months, but eventually she built a $1,000 emergency fund. It was the first time in her life she had money put aside, and the sense of security felt new and powerful. When her mom noticed she seemed calmer, Sarah only smiled. Inside, She knew she was slowly changing their future. She turned to her debt next. Following the snowball method, she listed every card and loan, from smallest to largest. The total, nearly $15,000, made her stomach turn. But she attacked the smallest balance first, throwing every extra dollar at it, while paying minimums on the others. When she finally cleared that card, she cut it in half and taped the pieces above her desk as a reminder. Progress was slow, and sometimes life got in the way. When her mom was hospitalized again, Sarah paused payments to cover medical bills. Some months she barely managed the minimums, but she always came back to the plan. By 23, she had managed to cut her debt nearly in half. One night, while searching YouTube for budgeting tips, she stumbled on a video about investing in index funds. She had always assumed investing was only for the rich, but the video explained how ordinary people could put in small amounts consistently and build wealth over time. Intrigued, Sarah opened a free brokerage account. She transferred $50, money that once would have been spent on takeout, into an S&P 500 index fund. Watching her balance tick up and down was strange at first. She put in $100 the next month, and then another. At first the growth was tiny, just a few cents of change. But the idea that her money could work for her instead of vanishing instantly was intoxicating. Sarah wanted to invest more, but her income was limited. So she made a tough decision. She picked up a second waitressing job on top of her diner shifts. 4 months she worked from early morning until late at night, collapsing into bed only to do it all over again the next day. It was exhausting. But each time she transferred another $100 or $2 into her investment account, she felt like she was buying a ticket out of the life she hated. Slowly, things shifted. By the time she was 24, her debts had dropped below $5,000. Her savings and investments combined were nearly $10,000, a number she had never dreamed of. She still lived in the same small apartment with her mom, still worked shifts that left her feet aching, but for the first time she felt in control. Her mom noticed. One evening, Carmen looked at her with pride. "Mija, I don't know what you're doing differently, but I can see it. You walk lighter." Sarah smiled. She didn't tell her mom about index funds or budgets. She just said, "I'm learning." But life was never smooth. The restaurant where Sarah worked cut staff, slashing her hours. The stock market dipped, wiping out some of the gains she had been so excited about. She stared at her account in despair as the balance dropped hundreds of dollars in a week. For a moment, she considered pulling all the money out. But then she remembered what she had read. Markets go up and down, but patience is rewarded. She forced herself to leave the money alone. And within months, the numbers rebounded. That experience taught her one of the hardest lessons of investing: discipline. Her journey was still far from over, but Sarah was changing. The girl who once believed she was doomed to debt and low wages had transformed into a woman who budgeted, saved, and invested with purpose. Sarah kept going, even when exhaustion gnawed at her, and her feet ached from standing 12 hours straight. She reminded herself of the bigger picture. Each dollar saved was a brick in the foundation of a new life. By the time she turned 25, she had finally paid off her last credit card. The day she saw her balance drop to zero, she burst into tears. She had carried debt for so long it felt like a part of her identity, but now it was gone. She celebrated quietly with her mom over a homemade dinner, but inside she felt a powerful shift. She was no longer a victim of her finances, she was in control. With the weight of debt lifted, Sarah could channel more money into investing. She automated her transfers, sending a fixed portion of every paycheck into her brokerage account. At first it was $200 a month, then $300. Then more as she picked up over time. Watching her account grow from 4 figures to 5 was surreal. For the first time, she began to imagine a future where she wouldn't be trapped in low-paying jobs forever. Still, progress wasn't linear. Her mom's health continued to decline, and hospital visits drained Sarah both emotionally and financially. She sometimes questioned whether her efforts were worth it. Would she ever have enough to truly change their lives? But every time doubt crept in, She looked back at how far she had come. From a girl drowning in debt with no savings to a woman with investments, discipline, and a plan. She refused to quit. She also kept learning. She devoured books on personal finance, listened to podcasts about investing, and followed financial educators online. The more she learned, the more confident she became. She avoided risky trends like day trading or cryptocurrency bubbles. Instead, she stuck with her boring but steady index funds, letting time and consistency work in her favor. By 27, her net worth had crossed $50,000. It wasn't millions, but to Sarah, it was life-changing. That money represented security, freedom, and hope. She used part of her savings to move her mom into a slightly better apartment, still small, but with reliable heating, no cockroaches, and enough light to make it feel like home. For the first time, Carmen could rest without constantly worrying about eviction notices or unpaid bills. "Mija, you've done more for me than I ever dreamed," she told Sarah, holding her hand with tears in her eyes. Sarah smiled, though she knew this was only the beginning. At work, Sarah started to notice something too. She no longer felt trapped. Waitressing had once felt like a life sentence, but now it was just temporary. She had options. That knowledge gave her confidence, and it even changed how she carried herself with customers and coworkers. The years kept passing, and with them came both challenges and victories. There were layoffs, market downturns, and medical scares. But there were also promotions, steady compounding, and moments of joy. Sarah continued her disciplined approach, budgeting, investing consistently, and avoiding unnecessary debt. By the time she turned 30, Sarah's portfolio had grown to nearly $200,000. Combined with her emergency savings, and the fact that she was completely debt-free, she had achieved something she once thought impossible: true financial independence. She wasn't rich by flashy standards, she didn't drive a luxury car, or live in a penthouse. But she had security, she had freedom, and most importantly, she had peace of mind. On her 30th birthday, Sarah surprised her mom with the biggest gift of all, a down payment on a small condo. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs. No landlord could threaten them, no rent hikes could push them out. Carmen cried as Sarah handed her the keys. For Sarah, that moment was more rewarding than any number in her bank account. She had broken the cycle of poverty and built something lasting. Looking back, she realized that her journey wasn't about sudden success or overnight riches. It was about discipline, patience, and small, consistent steps. The lessons she had learned were simple but powerful. Track every dollar. Spend less than you earn. Avoid debt whenever possible. Invest consistently, even in small amounts. Be patient, because wealth builds slowly. Sarah sometimes thought of the man at the diner, who had scribbled a book title on a napkin years ago. She never saw him again, but his advice had been the spark that changed everything. She wished she could thank him, to show him how far she had come. But in a way, the best thanks was living the life she had once thought impossible. Her story wasn't glamorous. There were no lottery wins, no overnight million-dollar businesses, no viral success. Just a young woman who decided she was tired of being poor and ignorant about money, who worked herself to the bone, and who stuck with the basics until they transformed her life. At 30, Sarah stood in the living room of the condo she now shared with her mother, sunlight streaming through the windows. She was debt-free, financially independent, and finally free from the constant fear of money that had haunted her childhood. She wasn't done yet. She planned to keep investing, keep learning, and eventually use her story to help others. Because if a broke waitress from Brooklyn could turn her life around, then maybe, just maybe, others could too. Sarah's journey teaches us a simple but powerful truth: money isn't about luck or secret formulas. It's about discipline, patience, and small choices made every single day. She didn't become wealthy overnight. She didn't start with rich parents, or a fancy degree, or a lucky break. She started with nothing, actually, worse than nothing. She started with debt, exhaustion, and fear. But instead of giving up, Sarah decided to learn. She tracked every dollar, cut her expenses, and slowly dug herself out of debt. She built an emergency fund, started investing even tiny amounts, and stayed consistent no matter what happened. She worked double shifts, sacrificed short-term comfort, and trusted the process. And it worked. Over the years, her small steps turned into big results. She became debt-free. She built investments. She bought a home for her mother. Most importantly, she bought peace of mind and freedom. Sarah's story shows that anyone, no matter where you start, can change their financial future. It doesn't take genius, or luck, or a perfect plan. It takes commitment. It takes consistency. And it takes the courage to believe that you deserve a better life. So if you feel stuck, drowning in bills or debt, remember Sarah. Start small, start today, and keep going. Your future self will thank you.